Okay. Well, welcome everyone, anyone who may be joining us today. And of course, my co-host, who's back from a beautiful vacation, Karin Gatrinick, the Queen of
Hi.
Smiles, right? The Queen of Smiles. Uh, she always puts a smile on my face. And I imagine anybody who's watching is going to go, I love Karin's smile, right? Anyways, we're back
Life is
with
beautiful. That's the point.
That's it. Smiles are great. So we're back with Raymond Hollowell's Working with the Law. Excellent book. We're now on the chapter that is the law of sacrifice. And as I always say, he does speak quite a bit in the beginning of each chapter in regards to referencing the Bible. Um, However, it's not a religious book, and it's not designed to encourage or discourage anybody from whatever beliefs you may have. I find it fascinating. I've said it many, many times. I really kind of like the idea of how he goes back and finds scripture and then talks about the laws of the universe and how it was actually spoken of in the Bible and by Jesus in a lot of cases. So, anyways, let's get started. Again, we're on the law of sacrifice from Raymond Hollowell's book, Working with the Law. And I'm going to start reading. And now I just mentioned that he refers to the Bible quite a bit. The very first part of it, he's using a quote from Matthew 7:14, where it says, "Straight is the gate and narrow is the way which leads unto life, and few there be that finds it." Now, I really kind of like this particular chapter because it's really important, I think, that people understand it. If you want something in life, you're going to have to make sacrifices. And that's really what he's talking about here. It takes him a little bit of time to get to it, but that's really what it is. And, you have to be willing to give something up to get something more. And, you get people, I have people all the time, imagine you do, Karin, as well, that, they want certain things in their life. And then, when you start showing them ideas and thoughts of ways that they can actually attain it, well, then they don't do it. Like, we both probably have clients that we've worked with that, they have certain goals, and you give them some ideas of things that they could be doing over the next week, and the whole week comes by and you see them again and they did nothing. So this is what this is about, is you have to be willing to make the sacrifices. And, we're both in the personal development world. So it's also important to understand that you have to understand that you're going to have resistance. You're going to you're going to hit what I refer to as a wall, or the resistance. You're going to have to get uncomfortable, and that's part of the sacrifice. You're going to have to sacrifice how you feel to get the things you want in life, and it's worth it. I can tell you from my own personal experience. Uh, it seems hard, but it's worth it. So, any thoughts on that before I start reading this, Miss Gander?
Yeah, the topic on sacrifice is really a cool topic. I love this chapter. So what we talked about is the sacrifice to give up the old self. If anyone wants to step into a new life and make really magnificent changes in life, then you have to give up the old life and the old personality. And I hope that many people can take something with them, what it means, the sacrifice. Sacrifice is often a word um, who brings some negativity with it, but it is not, because sacrifice is giving up something that doesn't help you anymore, something that you don't want to have in your life anymore. And that's the beautiful part.
Yeah. I was just thinking, even when it comes to if let's say your goal is to lose weight, well, you're going to have to sacrifice some of the things you like. Like
Yeah.
I would have to sacrifice Ben and Jerry's Cherry Garcia ice cream. Things like that. You know, I also sometimes chocolate.
Oh, yes.
But in most cases, people are trying to improve their financial situations, which means that you're going to have to sacrifice some time. Like, if you're trying to build a business, you're going to have to sacrifice your time. You're going to have to sacrifice, spending time with friends and family and things like that. And, it isn't about sacrificing forever. It's about getting where you want to get to. Like, you're going to have to make those sacrifices. So let's take a look and see what Raymond Hollowell says. And it starts with every man. Keep in mind, this was written back in 1934, so it may not have the politically correct words in it. We're just going to excuse that, I think, for now, and then try to fix it. So it says, every man should have an idea or a hero, an ideal or a hero. If there is one who has none and desires none, do not trust him too far. A man who has no ideas does not wish to be any greater than he is, and will in time prove a detriment to others. Abraham Lincoln is the ideal hero for the American youth, and that applies to any youth from 60 or 6 to 60 or over. Lincoln came from the lowliest, as he says, and poorest of stock, and yet rose to the highest office in the land we as a people can bestow. There is hardly a boy or a man today who cannot say that he has as many or more natural gifts and opportunities than Lincoln had. He was plain and honest and determined to get along rather rest his lanky, sorry, hang on a second, I'm just adjusting where I'm sitting here. Rather rest his lanky body in some comfortable position and proceed to tell yarns than to do any work. He was neither as polite nor as polished as his wife wanted him to be. Sounds familiar, I think, most marriages, right?
Yeah.
He had but a few dollars in his pocket when he moved into the White House as our president. But money does not make a man. This is important. Money does not make a man. Polished manners do not make him. Even education does not make great a man whose soul is small. Abe's soul began to grow from the seed of thought that was placed in his mind when yet a small lad by his mother, who made it a point to teach him what she could when she was able. One day, Mrs. Lincoln became very ill, and knowing that she was placing her feeble hand upon little Abe's head, she said to them, "Be good to one another." She expressed the hope that they live as she had taught them, loving their kindred and worshiping God. She had done her work and stoop-shouldered, thin-breasted, sad at times, most miserable, without prospect or better conditions on earth, she passed away. She may have dreamed, but little realized the grand future that lay in store for the ragged, helpless boy who stood at her side. Though Abe was quite young at her passing, he never forgot his mother. She taught him a lesson that he carried with him through life. This is what she taught him here. She says she taught him that the beginning of wisdom is not imposed by discipline, but the beginning of wisdom is the first a desire for discipline, the love of it, the voluntary choice of it. Thus, he learned that discipline is the high road that leads to everything that makes life worth living. That's true. We have to be disciplined. And this goes back into what we're getting on here about sacrifice. You have to be disciplined, and that obviously does require some sacrifice. So it goes on to say here, go to a concert or opera today and listen to the voice that captivates the music lovers who hear it. Voices of such artists as, I don't even know who these people are, McCormick, Lily Pons, I think I heard that one, Thomas, Eddie, McDonald, Moore, and your favorites that you can name. How did they ever happen? They do not happen, granted that they may be especially gifted, but those final magical results come not by chance or accident, but from discipline. Discipline that is consciously chosen, ardently desired, and patiently persisted in. Very true. Like, there isn't anybody today that's successful at anything that wasn't disciplined. Even yourself. You published a book recently. Well, you had to be disciplined to do that. Right?
And I think it goes hand in hand, the sacrifice and the discipline.
Yes.
Without discipline, and that's often a problem when I work with people, that ideas came up and people start acting on the idea and then they stop.
Yeah.
And that is when the sacrifice comes in, they have to sacrifice time with friends or whatever. And then they stop doing this thing, what brings them to the goal.
That's right.
What
Yeah.
brings the outcome. And yeah, that's a big part where many people fail on the way to success.
A lot of times, even some of that sacrifice, which I think we're going to get into it, but could be money. Maybe you
Yeah.
have to hire somebody. Maybe you have to take a course. Maybe you have to do certain things to get more skills. Right? Anyhow,
Yeah.
I'm pretty sure we actually talked about that in here. So probably shouldn't get ahead of myself. But anyhow, it says Karen reads.
Yes, Karen reads. Okay. Yet we hear it said that we are an undisciplined generation of people. This, however, is not true. In every realm of life, we enjoy the fruits of disciplined research and toil with results far greater than our forefathers ever dreamed. I shall never forget the thrilling experience I had one evening sitting in my home before a cozy fireside. The radio was beside my chair, and I casually reached over, turned it on, and selected a prominent station. To my keen surprise, I heard a voice calling Richard Byrd in the Antarctic regions at the South Pole. I then heard the commander tell of the hazard and difficulties they had met the day before as they unloaded supplies and hauled them to their new home, Little America, over the slope of broken ice and drifted snow. Had he written a detailed report and sent it by letter, it would have taken months to reach us. Yet here, in less than a second, his voice vibrated through the air, and I, like many others, heard him report the happenings of the day. The old miracle workers never dreamed that as this could happen. Happen, that is not the word. Discipline, that is it. It was painstaking, scientific, technical discipline that produced such a result.
Right.
We are not an undisciplined generation in any realm except one, and that is in our morals. In science, in art, in athletics, in any practical endeavor, we know the worth of discipline. Yet we let ourselves go. We must have our fling. We unleash our instincts and throw off restraint. It is the denial of discipline that characterizes much of our moral life. Men everywhere are awakening to the necessity of disciplining their thoughts and acts. We train domestic animals carefully. Oh, that's what I do with horses, for example.
Yeah.
We harness the forces of nature to serve us regularly and well, and yet when it comes to ourselves, the most valued of all, we let our thoughts run wild. And this is also discipline, the thinking.
Yeah.
Yeah, so many people are sloppy thinkers.
Mm-hmm.
Let the mind run wild.
That's right. Yeah. But a lot of people don't think at all.
Yeah, exactly. No one can attain his ambitions until he leans to discipline his mental force and is able to control his thinking.
Yeah.
No one can be truly religious before his mind is in order and his ideals are brought in harmony with the divine mind. No one can gain wisdom and understanding of life except that he seeks it in God's appointed way according to the law. First, let us note one simple fact. Something always has to be sacrificed for something else. Everything in life has its own price and is ever up for sale. We have to purchase it at the price it demands. Day after day, we go up to life's counter and say, I will give you this if you will give me that. Mm-hmm. This bartering has another name more familiar, perhaps we call it sacrifice. Sacrifice, then, is not what our preachers have made it out to be. It is an inescapable necessity. It is a definite law that we must obey. We are sacrificing every day of our lives, whether we want to or not, whether we know it or not. No matter what we want of life, we have to give up something in order to get it. From one of the masters saying, the modern mind shrinks back and tries to avoid. Straight is the gate and narrow is the way which leads unto life, and few there are that finds it. How we dislike to hear such words. We are through with narrowness, we say. We are more liberal today. We want the broad open ways. We claim our freedom and declare there is no need for us to be so narrow. So sacrifice and discipline goes really hand in hand.
Absolutely. So, yeah. No doubt. And that's the thing, again, we've been talking about, a lot of people are not disciplined.
Yeah.
And it does require that, again, you and I have both done certain things. And like you even mentioned your horses, like, I don't really know a lot about horses. You're the expert here on horses, but it requires a discipline to train them because they don't want to be trained, right? Yeah. Like, they don't come and show up at your doorstep and say, hey, I want you to ride me on my back. They don't do that, do they? Like again, getting about horses, I keep, there's a show that I think a lot of people watch, Yellowstone, and there's lots of horses, obviously. And it's fascinating because they show them breaking the horses and things like that. And it's a lot of work. And
absolutely,
it requires discipline. And of course, the sacrifice of the time to make it happen, right? So.
Absolutely. And that's so interesting. It's not only that I can work with the horses in horseback riding or working from the ground, but it's also the discipline in my thinking. And that's what I do with my clients. Right. My clients have to be disciplined in thinking, because the horse shows exactly what vibration is on right now. Mm-hmm. That's really interesting. Yeah.
Nice thing about it is there's no hiding it from them either.
No way. Never, ever.
It's not like they're going to say, oh, well, let's pretend that this person's in a good vibration. They're not going to do that, right? I love animals. So it's up to me now, right? Okay, so there are a few statements that Jesus uttered that are more accurate and complete than that one. Which one was that? We need to go through the small. Okay, here. No man will ever find the richness of life in any realm by loose and casual wandering. Always he will have to go down a narrow way and through a straight gate called discipline. Go hear Chrysler play his violin and listen to music that is almost divine. Watch the skilled surgeon at his delicate task of repairing a broken body that may hold its life a little longer for the soul to grow stronger. Consider the scientist in his laboratory with his scientific formulas. Remember George Eliot saying that he was a young woman when she began, what George Eliot was saying? Began Romola, but an old one when she finished it. Or think of Admiral Beard flying over the South Pole, talking to us about it by means of radio. Are such experiences life? Indeed they are. Liberated life is an attained achievement, the most satisfying sort of living man can ever know. But straight is the gate and narrow is the way of discipline that leads to such a life. Now, he goes on to say, when this law of sacrifice is carried over into the moral realm, it is commonly presented one-sided. We are taught that if we want to live a good life, we have to give up so many pleasures. How familiar that sounds to some of us. The result is that we rebel, and when we think of sacrifice, we think of the ones who have had to give up so much pleasure for goodness. Who are some of the great sacrificers in history? Well, there are some. There was Socrates, who drank the hemlock. There was Jesus, who was crucified on a cross. There was Paul, who was beheaded. There was Peter, who was crucified upside down. There was Luther and Wesley and Calvin, all religionists. They were Livingstone, Nightingale, and scores of others. But think for a moment, they are the ones who made the most terrific sacrifices. Now we speak of the supreme sacrifice of Jesus upon the cross. We read of the martyrdom of Saint Peter, Paul, and John. But what about Judas? I cannot say his last name. Think of what he had as a chance to become. Think of the companionship he once possessed and the place he might have occupied. Think of what he threw away. Think of what he got for it. I say to you, the cross was not a sacrifice to be compared with what Judas paid. For but 30 pieces of silver and utter disgrace, he cast aside the richest opportunity of any man in all history. A youth who had disdained discipline, had cast aside restraint, and had his fling wrote as he sat behind prison bars. 1,000 times I have paid in full for those few hours. This young man and his nephew, a few years his junior, had attended a rival meeting in town. Not far from me on their way home, they argued the question the minister had talked about at the meeting. The argument grew into angry words, and when they reached home, this anger had been fanned to a murderous heat. The younger man went to his room and got a gun and shot the uncle. The uncle, in turn, wrestled for the gun and turned it upon the youth and killed him. I say this is costly living. We should take this earnestly unto ourselves and realize how the word sacrifice touches every one of us. A man called at my office seeking help in a very serious problem. He had a fine home, a lovely devoted wife, and 2 splendid children. It is true that the wife had taken up much of her time with the children, and the husband was going out to his club and social affairs alone. He had met another woman and thought he was in love with her. This was his problem. What about the family and the home? There is only one answer, and it is not for me or any mortal to decide. The law will determine it for you. You cannot have a lovely home, a devoted family, and enjoy loose living if you will not sacrifice or give up the loose living for the lovely home. You will be forced to sacrifice a lovely home and loved ones for loose living. Very true. Now, again, we're not trying to tell people how they should live their lives, but something's going to give, right? And in this case, he may be giving up something that he really, truly wanted. Maybe not, but you cannot enjoy the satisfactions and pleasures of a true relationship and indulge in a bad temper. If you will not sacrifice your temper for friendships, you will sacrifice your friendships for a bad temper. One cannot have a sterling character that friends will respect and trust and resort to crooked practices. If he will not give up his crooked ways of trustworthiness, he will have to sacrifice his trustworthiness for crookedness. See that all the time too. I think about people that, they lie, they cheat, they steal, and then they wonder why they don't have happy lives. They might have something temporarily, but it's not going to work. You have to sacrifice the bad to get the good. And sometimes, sometimes you have to sacrifice some good to get more good. But
yeah, but you see, in this story, it's not about judging what's right or wrong. Everyone has to make the decision for himself.
Yep.
But it shows so exactly that you have to give up one thing to get another thing.
Right.
And whatsoever the person chooses, he has to give up something other.
That's right. Yeah. That's the way it works. It's the law of sacrifice, right?
Yeah. It's interesting how he talks about it, Raymond Hollywell, in 1934.
Yeah. And a lot of what he's talking about is still true today.
Yeah.
90 years later, it's still the same. Yeah.
And I like it because I think it's such a good material, because on one side you have the law of sacrifice, the law of success, and the law of thinking. And then he also talks about connecting with the higher self and the law of attraction. And this is all a summoning from so many aspects. And I think it's important to connect these dots.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah.
That's the way to success.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think that, there's lots of laws, and obviously we're talking about them from this book, but there's so many in here, and they all go together.
Yeah.
And something that was interesting that I think he said it earlier in one of the chapters was that breaking the laws is actually what sin is,
Mm-hmm.
right? It's not, the sin is not what somebody has told you it is. Sin is breaking these laws of the universe, or God's
Yeah.
laws, however you want to describe it, right? It's fascinating. And again, this is a law that must be uh, respected. You're never
Yeah.
going to move forward unless you're willing to sacrifice something, leave something behind that's going to
Mm-hmm.
allow you to move forward. Uh, and then, in this case, he's talking about, it can work the exact opposite. This particular man was feeling lonely and found company somewhere else. Well, he has to decide whether he wants to sacrifice the family from before for the new person, or sacrifice the new person for the family he's already has, right? That's the way
Yeah.
it works. You have to give something, right?
Absolutely.
This is
Yeah.
a great book. And by the way, anybody who might want the book, if you don't already have it, just reach out to Card and we certainly get you a downloaded version of it. Um, anyhow, it says Karen read.
Karen reads. You may ever be sure of this, no matter how far you may go before the rope gets tight, no matter how wild or how lax you may live, even though you think you are getting away with it and you cannot fool the law. Something always has to be paid for something else.
Very important.
All, pardon me?
I was just saying, really important. Something
Yeah,
always has to be paid for
absolutely.
something else, right? Yeah.
All fine living, all success and happiness is like fine art. You must choose the spiritual beauty to be created and desired, then go the straight and narrow way to gain it. For the beginning of wisdom is first the desire of discipline. Some say then, if you want to enjoy the pleasure of life, this means that your freedom is impossible. It means, on the contrary, that you who think this have not found what real freedom is. This reminds me of a drunkard who was given a stump lecture to the amusement of a few on the subject of freedom. He declared he wanted his freedom and that he had the right to drink all the liquor he wanted, and no government could stop him. He was having his freedom, and yet he was so drunk he did not know what he was saying or doing. Freedom is not living an obsessed, undisciplined life. Freedom is in being able to control your life and in making it what you want it to be. If you wish to become a skilled athlete, an efficient teacher, an expert lawyer, or a beautiful singer, the beginning of such success is first the desire for discipline of your time and thought. If you want that rich, radiant, and worthwhile speciality in living life, the rule is just the same. An undisciplined life is an insane life.
Mhm.
We must pull ourselves together around high ideals of clean, servable, and effective living under the highest leadership we know or under the teachings and the example of a master. And I think this is an important part. The law of discipline, or the discipline he's talking about here. So many people fail on the way to success. We talk a lot about of success, and I think money is a big topic for everyone, especially now in these times. Then people try something new, and they see, okay, it doesn't bring me to the point, to the goal I want to be, and then they stop, and this is not discipline for me.
Yeah.
So I encourage everyone, if this doesn't work, try something else.
Try it
And
again.
if this doesn't work, try something else, but have the discipline to stay in tune.
Yeah.
Go on and stay on the path. And this is discipline for me too.
Yeah. For everybody. Yeah.
Yeah.
The key is never stop starting.
Yeah.
You got to keep moving forward. And that's, the discipline is staying focused on where you want to go. And the sacrifice is you're going to have to give up something
Mm-hmm.
to make it
Yeah.
happen. And it's amazing how many people are unwilling. They tell you, I want this, I want this, I want this in my life. Well, what are you willing to give up for it? What are you willing to do for it?
Oh, most of the people say, I don't know,
I don't
nothing.
know. Yeah,
I don't want to give up anything.
yeah. And this, the sad part is they don't get anywhere. They don't, nothing changes. They just keep doing the same thing over and over again. It's the same life every single day is the same as it was the day before.
Yeah, exactly.
There's no point in wishing for something if you're not willing to sacrifice something to obtain it and having the discipline to pursue it, right?
Yeah, without discipline, it's not going to be a goal or an intention. It stays a wish
Just a wish.
forever.
Yeah,
Yeah.
absolutely. Yeah.
So he goes on with the highest example of a master is the Christ. In all his work and teachings, he proved that discipline, self control, and self mastery ever precede wisdom and achievement. Mr. Lincoln had taught his words to little Abe, and it was because Abe grew into manhood and sacrificed his life of laziness, looseness, and careless meanderings for the straight and narrow way of a disciplined life of principle and honesty and justice that caused him to become a great soul. It was the law of sacrifice working through him that enabled him to become a president and savior of a great nation.
Mm-hmm.
Evidence of this greatness was seen in his work at Washington. During the war, a young Vermont boy whose name was William Scott was sentenced to face the firing squad for being found asleep at his post. Now it wasn't Scott's post, but that of his buddy, whom he had relieved when he became ill. Double duty was too much for Scott, so he fell asleep. He was so well liked by all his captain and friends, appealed his case to the president. Lincoln decided to go to Chain Bridge and handle the case in person. He went to the camp and talked to Scott. Scott said he was the kindest person he had ever met. He said the president had asked him about his home, the farm, his friends, and lastly, his mother. He said he was glad he could draw a picture of her out of the bosom of his shirt and show it to him. Mr. Lincoln told him how thankful he should be to have a mother and how he should make her a proud mother, and that he should never cause her mother a sorrow or tear. Scott thought it very strange that he did not speak of his fate in the morning. Strange that he should advise not to cause his mother another sorrow or tear when he was about to die. Finally, he mustered up his courage and asked the president if he would grant one favor, namely, that he would not have to face his friends, but that a firing squad be drawn from another company. Mr. Lincoln wheeled about and facing Scott said, "My boy, you are not going to be shot tomorrow. I'm going to trust you and send you back to your friends. As I have been put to considerable trouble to come up from Washington, how are you going to pay the bill?" The boy stammered his gratitude. He suggested he could send him his savings. He could borrow money by mortgaging the farm. His friends would help too, and there was all his army pay. Then Mr. Lincoln put his hands on the boy's shoulders and looking sorrowfully into his face, he said, "My boy, my bill is a very large one. Your friends cannot pay it, nor your bounty, nor the farm, nor your comrades. There is only one man in all this world who can pay it, and his name is William Scott. If from this day William Scott does his duty, so that if I were to be there when he comes to die, he can look me in the face as he is now doing and say, I have kept my promise, then my debt will be fully paid.
Mhm.
It's a beautiful story.
It is, yeah.
Yeah.
It's too bad Lincoln wasn't around longer. I think he was an excellent president. Right? So
Absolutely.
Raymond goes on and says, William Scott kept that promise. He had learned the secret that Mr. Lincoln's mother had taught him when a boy. It was this law of sacrifice, and that the beginning of such wisdom was first the desire and love of discipline, that it was the straight and narrow way that led to the high road of everything that makes life worth living. It was the road that led Mr. Lincoln to the White House. It was the road that leads back to the Vermont hills, to home, to happiness, and to mother. It is the road for all who persevere and find it. It is the road that Jesus followed to triumph and mastery. It is the road I recommend to you, for on it you will find the law of sacrifice, ever working to bring to you the joys and the pleasures, the results always from the wisdom and understanding that accompany it. Blessed is the man who endures temptation, for when he is tried, he shall receive the crown of life, which the Lord, law, has promised to them that love the Lord, which is law, right? Now he ends this particular chapter, which again I think it's a great chapter. I highly recommend maybe reading it over a few times, even watching this video over again. You can get all of this on the Elevate Network. If you go to myelevatenetwork.com, you can find it there. So anyways, he ends here with Invictus. It says, out of the night that covers me, black as the pit from pole to pole, I think whatever gods may be for my unconquerable soul, in the felled clutch of circumstance, I have not winced nor cried aloud. Under the bludgeonings of chance, my head is bloody, but unbowed. Beyond this place of wrath and tears looms but the horror of the shade, and yet this menace of the years finds and shall find me unafraid. It matters not how straight the gate, how charged with punishment the scroll. I am the master of my fate. I am the captain of my soul. That's from W.E. Henley. Again, excellent book.
Absolutely.
That's the law of sacrifice. We certainly love doing these, and we will be back again next week with the next one, which top of my head, I can't think what it is. You usually know what they are. Do you know what the next one is?
Yeah, next week we have the law of obedience.
Okay, I was thinking that, and then I'm thinking I don't have it in front of me, so it's yeah.
Mhm.
So the law of obedience, that's another good one, actually, by the way. So I highly recommend following this. Actually, everything in this book. There's there's 11 laws in here, and most people don't really quite understand them and don't realize that we're operating by law. And if you go against the laws, you can kind of guarantee that your life isn't going to necessarily go the way you hope. This is a big one though, because you have to be willing to give up something to get something of a higher nature, and that's the law of sacrifice. So, any further thoughts that you'd like to add to this, Ms. Karen Gafferney?
Yeah, I think it's also what many people don't have is the faith in the laws.
Yeah.
Because if we sacrifice, the universe rewards us all the time.
Right. Yeah.
So if we sacrifice, we get something back.
Yeah.
We pay something, we give something up, and therefore we get something new.
Yeah.
And that's the law, to be sure and to know it, not to hope it, but the faith has to be so strong. And I think that's important for everyone to have the faith in the laws, because
Right.
it works, and it works all the time.
Absolutely works. Yeah. And one of the things too with sacrifice, the way this law works, if you're giving up something for something of a higher nature, you're going to find that it was worth it, because what you
Yes.
receive is far greater than what you gave up. And that's a beautiful thing, the way this universe works, is you actually win, but you have to have the courage and the willingness to have the discipline and be willing to give up something of a lower nature to receive something of a higher nature. it's a fantastic lesson, and I hope people will give some thought. And when you're talking about the laws of the laws, like a good example of that is if you just think about the law of gravity. You can
Yeah.
walk off the top of a roof and you're going to fall and possibly hurt yourself or maybe die. Like that, you can't break that law. Like, and yet you at the same time you can use it for your benefit, right? Like
Yeah.
you can use the law of gravity for your benefit. But at the same time, if you violate the law of gravity, well, it can be quite harmful, right? So it's the
Yeah.
same with all these laws, right?
Yeah.
Any,
Exactly.
yeah,
Great
any,
stuff.
if somebody wants to reach out to you and talk to you about what you do, which is some pretty amazing things, how would they reach you?
Oh, on karingatternick.com, you can reach me. This is my homepage.
Very good. And if you need me, I'm at leemjenkins.com. And as always, it was great being with you today, Karin Gatternick. I love saying your whole name for some reason.
My
Karin
pleasure
Gatternick.
too.
It's not just Karin, it's Karin Gatternick. There's something about that I like to. Anyhow, it was great seeing you, and we'll obviously be back again next week with the law of obedience, right?
Of obedience, yes.
And
All right.
we'll see you all next week.
Next week. Bye.